Good evening and welcome to the August 9th board meeting. It's 6:30 and I'd like to call our meeting to order. We have all 7 board members present. The first item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda, and what are the wishes of the board?
I move to present or adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion passes 7-0.
We will move to item 3A, public comments. Public comments will be allowed with a duration of 3 minutes per person, 3 minutes per speaker to be timed by the board clerk. And speakers must sign up for in-person public comment by 1 p.m. the day of the board meeting. The public comment by email or remote not be accepted, that those giving public comment not approach the board or move past the podium. No handouts will be allowed, but such materials may be emailed in advance to the board clerk for distribution to the board, and the public comment may not include reference to names of specific students and/or personnel matters, which would potentially violate an individual's privacy, and that the board will not engage in discussion at that time except to gain clarification. Casey, do we have any public comment this evening?
We do not.
The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. One second, my computer's just running a little slow. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine business and can be handled with a single motion and vote unless a board member would like to remove an item for a separate discussion or consideration. Is there any discussion, or would anyone like to make a motion?
I would like to move that we remove item D, employment recommendations, from the consent agenda and add another 10-minute executive session under item 9.
Okay, thank you. We will make that note on the agenda. With that item removed, do we have a motion to pass the consent agenda this evening?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. The next item is teaching and learning items. Dr. Harder?
Tonight, we have Mrs. Glaines, Director of Student Services, presenting our MOU, our Memorandum of Understanding. I told Mrs. Glaines to walk slowly so I could explain a little bit about our goals. So we've been very intentional about whenever we have a board agenda item, we align them with our strategic priorities and goals, and we have those listed, but we're going to be more intentional about actually stating them. So the goals that this aligns with is number 3, create purposeful community-wide educational activities that promote an inclusive culture of learning, and then also utilizing multiple means of communication to engage all stakeholders. So what Mrs. Glades is going to share tonight is a memorandum of understanding and explaining how we serve students who might be incarcerated. Is something that we've done for many years, but this actually formalizes the process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I've created a slideshow here just to talk a little bit about it. It's pretty brief, but KSDE has implemented a monitoring cycle for the jail facilities in Kansas. So like Dr. Harder said, our processes have been in place for several years to ensure that we know when there are students with disabilities who require our assistance, whether they are detained or incarcerated. So we have been providing these services, but now the state wants to have a formal monitoring cycle in place for them. So that's what we're talking about tonight. So we are just going to analyze the state, is going to analyze their processes and policies regarding those incarcerated students with IEPs to make sure that they are receiving that free and appropriate public education. So our cooperatives are part of this, our interlocals and our individual districts are all doing this monitoring cycle. So as you can see, keep on that. This is a process, so we're just in the very beginning stages. So we did submit the self-assessment. That's typical for a lot of our monitoring cycles, is that we do a self-assessment first. So we have completed that. We actually got a shout out at the TASN Leadership Conference. One of the TASN people who was reviewing those said that we did a great job on that. So we were patting ourselves on the back for that. We really put a lot of time into that. So that is completed. So as you can see, it is a year-long process. They will let us know what the cohort cycle looks like for monitoring in May. For that, they'll first start monitoring those plans during the 24-25 school year. And typically when they break into cohorts with 7 school districts, we are in every cohort, and that's fine. So, but in this case, we have 2 local jail facilities that are part of the cooperative, and that's the Chase County Jail and then the Lyon County Jail. So we will just have to see in May which cohort those are in. So again, the timeline, next slide, Casey, is good. So the memorandum of understanding is not required, but they said it is best practice. And it is just to really spell out that clear documentation of how we are going to have those communication channels with our jail facilities and keep those open, who's responsible for what, those expectations. So it's clearly spelled out for everybody, and just to ensure that we're providing that free and appropriate public education for our students. So the outcomes, which I think really align, Dr. Harder, with what you said, this first one especially, is promoting those improved post-secondary outcomes. I feel like being involved in that strategic plan process, we heard that a lot. So that really aligns here. Building the capacity in the cooperatives and the interlocals and the districts to identify opportunities where we might need technical assistance in these processes. So that's another outcome that they're hoping. And then improving the identification and those actual services that are being provided when our students are detained or incarcerated. So, and I think that might be, yeah. And I'm happy to answer questions. Dr. Harder will assist me in answering questions too, because of course she's been involved in this. Like she said, it's been going on for a while, but now we get to monitor it.
I had a question. Is there any extra special funding for this if we do some assistance with this, or
They
no?
have not shared that we would receive additional funding. No, it's just an
Okay.
expectation of IDEA that we are going to continue to provide that FAPE, that free and appropriate public ed, until students either graduate or have met the requirements of some type of, degree or that diploma alternative or whatever. Or if we've decided that they're in an 18 to 21-year-old program, they've met those requirements as well. So no extra funding.
Okay, darn it.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
I had a question about the population this is going to, benefit, because I think this is a great idea. Juveniles don't get to go to the county jail. They go to a juvenile detention. We don't have a juvenile detention in Lyon and Chase County. So most of those people who are in juvenile detention are going to be in like Johnson County, somewhere else. When I was in legal aid practice, oftentimes you'd have to Zoom or remote video your juveniles in. So the persons you have receiving these programs that are in the Chase County and Lyon County Jail are probably going to end up being people charged as juveniles, but then who age to 18, and then they go from juvenile detention to the county jail, right?
Potentially, yes, that could be the case. Right. Typically, when students are placed somewhere else, a juvenile student, like you've made reference to, that becomes the responsibility of that local entity, if that makes sense. And we have that responsibility to communicate as needed with them, on student needs or the like. So yes, you described who this speaks to perfectly, that student who is of that 18-year-old age, who is detained, or even, like I said, 18 to 21. Yes.
Right. And so tell us, for the students who are brought into juvenile detention and they're in temporary custody for a couple of days before they go to, Topeka, a PRTF, a psychiatric residential treatment facility, or whatever, somewhere else. What services do we provide for those minors who aren't in the jail but are in state custody, or are they not captured in this MOU?
Correct. They are not captured in this particular MOU. That is right.
Okay, that's what I assumed. But
yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because then that clarifies for everybody.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments? Okay, this is an action item. What are the wishes of the board?
I move to approve the MOU between the Flint Hills Special Education Cooperative and county jail facilities for the delivery of special education services to provide a mechanism to ensure communication regarding incarcerated students. It was.
That's
I did
big.
it in one breath.
And the former defense attorney will second that.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, please cast your vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the construction update from Macau Gordon.
Mr. Eric Wolsey is here for his monthly update. This aligns with Goal 6, provide, maintain, and evaluate safe and secure learning environments that meet the ever-changing diverse needs of our students and staff.
Good evening. How's everybody doing today? So good. All right. So as always, we'll start out with just kind of the overall arching schedule of the bond. Things are tracking really well, and actually I'd like to just huge shout out to the schools and our construction teams, because we actually did receive final C of Os from all the fire marshals within the last couple of weeks for all the renovation areas that we were completing this summer. So that was a huge win. There were really very little hiccups, if any, very minor stuff as it came up. So nothing crazy like what we've seen in the past. So huge win for everybody, and we'll be ready for kids to show up next week. So it's great accomplishment. But and yeah, if you want to go to the next picture, Casey's, thank you. So Emporia Middle School is really, it's nearing completion. I don't know if you've had the chance to walk through there now that the wall graphics are up, but I would highly recommend that you poke your head in there, walk through there. It's turned out very nice, and y'all should be proud. Students should be proud. Community should be proud walking through there. So just some things that are going on currently at the middle school is the gym floor installation is underway. So hopefully by the end of the week, it will be really close to having all the wood installed, and then it will acclimate for a couple weeks. We'll come in and seal where the bleachers are going to go. So it'll just be a little section of where the bleachers are at. And then we will bleachers are scheduled to show up mid to late this month. Then we will install the bleachers, make sure they operate. We'll roll them back up in their stack position, and then we'll come back in and sand the rest of the floor out and seal it. Really, the reason we do that is because if there's any, say somebody drops a part on the gym floor, you don't want a dent in your brand new sealed maple floor. So that way we can sand out any of those imperfections if something were to happen. So that's kind of the sequence of operations for the gym. And really just kind of waiting on the weather to cooperate. We have some sod and some seed to install once the temperatures kind of settle back in and the rain lets way. So we've got to just touch up some of the final subgrades around the school, and then you'll see some sod go down and some grass seed. So any questions at the middle school? The renovation area too, sorry, I need to mention, is progressing well. So I was over there today. We started epoxy floors in the IS or intensive skills and life skills classroom. So once that's complete, we'll begin installing ceiling tile, and then really should finish up probably sometime in September. So it's coming along nicely, nearing completion as well. Any questions as it relates to the middle school? No? Okay. Village Elementary, this picture on the left is the new kitchen. Lot bigger, some more storage space. So if you remember, the kitchen was rather small, and right on the back side was the old conference room that everybody used to use if they needed to have a meeting. So we blew that wall out and expanded that overall kitchen. So definitely increased the size, which is nice. That middle picture is actually the new parking lot, some paving that we placed where the old gravel was. So we dug that out, and then that also ties into that kind of one-way exit to help alleviate that pickup and drop off. So, and then just the right side is just another picture of that kitchen prior to ceiling tile being dropped with the new sinks and appliances. So yeah. Things are coming together there. Really, the only thing we're waiting on is another air handler that we're going to install, but that's later down the road. So that's probably around the October, November timeframe that we'll coordinate with Ms. Mitchell over there and make sure we can do that when we minimize the impact to the school. So, and then Riverside and Timmerman Elementary. So Just a couple pictures here on the left. That's one of the renovated spaces. So both spaces, little spaces are, the square footage remains the same. They're just a little bit different. You know, one of the schools, there's a wall that has a doorway that you can pass back and forth to the classroom. The other school, they kept the demising wall, just showing the flooring and the finishes going in there. And then on the right side, that's actually Riverside, the masonry. So masonry will actually, the CMU that you see there will be complete by the end of this week. And as soon as that crew is done there, they will jump over to Timmerman and start that same process. And so we should begin installing the steel roof trusses sometime next week, followed by the metal deck at Riverside. Then we'll work on getting the roof on, and then once the masonry crew is complete over at Timmerman, they will fall back to Riverside and begin the brickwork for the facade there. So things are tracking nicely at both those schools. We were able to get the slabs down and the new parking down as well prior to the weather setting in today. So things are progressing nicely. And then William Allen White. So last Wednesday we presented kind of a high level schematic design budget to the Build for Future Executive Committee. Just kind of ringing through that scope of work there. What I'll do for next month too is I'll put a floor plan on here so we can just kind of show everybody remind everybody what the plan is there at William Allen White. But currently, you know, it's a little bit over budget, kind of what we talked about in the meeting. It's so early on that it's nothing to be worried about. There's going to be some other savings that come back from these other projects that will help offset some of that. But really, once we get into the design development phase, we'll be able to gain more trade input to see what the market's truly telling us. You know, costs are still going up. They're not going up as drastic as what we were seeing. So that's good overall. Some things we've tried to take into consideration is just those lessons learned from Walnut, right? Where we had to go back. The fire marshal made us go back and essentially we topped out the majority of those corridor walls, added all new doors and frames in the hallway for the rating that he was making us do. So trying to be cognizant of those costs and make sure we take all that into account, because that was some substantial costs that we did discuss way back when with Walnut, if you remember. So any questions as it pertains to any of the schools or William Allen White?
Did I see that Riverside got their matching parking, like
Yes.
the parking that
Yes,
Timmerman
that was
has?
actually, I think that was placed yesterday morning. So,
Cool.
yeah.
And so
it
that will be ready
yep.
for first day of school?
Yeah.
Set? I
Should
don't know
be
how
good.
long it takes
Yeah.
to set.
Um,
Awesome.
Yeah, usually, you know, you want it to reach its compressive strength, and I think here the concrete supplier that we've been using, that reaches fairly fast. So within 7 days. So we
Great.
should be able to have that open hopefully for you all.
Are there any other questions or comments? Art, did you have anything to add as a member of BFAC?
No, I just said that it looks good. Haven't seen the graphics yet at the middle school, but they look good in the pictures. So I'm excited to see that. And again, I think the community will be excited. The students will be excited about that space too.
Great. Well, thank you. And I feel like we owe you an apology because as often as you come here, you should have a team T-shirt as well.
I was
So
going
we
to
will
make a
fix
joke
that.
that I didn't get the memo, but yeah.
We'll get you one.
All right. All right. Well,
Right.
Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Also, everyone, take it. Great. The next item on the agenda, 7B, is the 2023-2024 Certified Staff Handbooks for preschool through elementary, Emporia Middle School, and Emporia High School. And this is our second reading of the handbooks.
Mr. Giffen, Director of Human Resources, is here tonight to present for the second reading. And this agenda item aligns with our goal of utilizing multiple means of communication to engage all stakeholders.
Good evening. I'm here to provide a quick recap, a summary if that is what you would like. I'm here to answer questions, or I can just stand back and you can take action if that's your pleasure. So please let me know how you would like to proceed.
I had a question about the transporting of students in private vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we kind of had an issue when we couldn't find bus drivers or, you know, we come up short. And I know that would could cause a situation that might put us in violation of this if we couldn't find a driver to do that. The other question is kind of related to this is when groups go to like conferences in the summer, like a team would go. I know that sometimes there's been a combination of either you go in a school suburban as a team, and I know we've approved like, I don't know if it's thespians or somebody going to a conference and they take those vehicles that are the districts. Would this apply to that too?
Yes, I think that anytime they're using our district vehicles, that's the one thing that I think this all centers around. It's just the liability issues. The students that are being transferred or transported on our district vehicles, the ones that are insured are the ones that are actually taking part in those activities or events. We've run into a couple of situations where we've known that a staff member's child may have been on there. We found a car seat in one of the vans, for instance. And again, just consulting with our insurance carriers and our KSB and our attorneys, it just boils down to a liability thing. If a staff member has their child on there, they are not covered in the event of an accident. So that's the crux of where that policy is coming from.
So was it a KSB policy or is it just something we were reacting to that we had seen?
It's something we had seen and wanted to address and make sure that we weren't getting in trouble with our insurance company.
Sure.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, this is an action item.
I move to approve the certified staff handbooks for preschool, elementary, Emporia Middle School, and Emporia High School as submitted.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, please cast your vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. The next item, 7C, is the Classified Substitute and Administrator Handbooks for 2023-2024 school year, and this is also the second reading.
The changes in these three were very minimal. I think the most major one to speak of is in the administrator handbook, and it's just who someone would report to if they felt like they were being harassed or bullied by a supervisor. Other than that, no other changes of significance in any of these three handbooks.
Are there any questions, comments? Okay, this is an action item.
I move to approve the classified substitute and administrator handbooks as submitted.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, please cast your vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Item 7D is the Emporia Middle School, Emporia High School Athletic Handbook for 2023-2024. This is also the second reading.
And again, the changes here are pretty minimal in the athletic handbook for the middle school and high school. Athletic director name change, added unified bowling. There was some wording that we thought was more negative in context, so we changed the headings and some of those to address some of the situations that were, again, kind of negative in nature. I'm trying to remember the specifics. Let me jump back there to those. For instruction, failure to properly supervise, we just titled supervision so that it was, again, in more of the positive context.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments?
I think the only thing I would add is that I would really like us to also have like an activities handbook at some point, and we've brought that up a couple times over the years, so that it's just laid out. There's not just a set of standards for the athletic teams. Those standards carry across to band and debate and forensics and theater and all those things. So someday I'd really like us to get there.
Okay.
That's all.
I agree 100%, Leslie.
And with that, I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I motion to approve the athletic handbook for Emporia Middle School and Emporia High School as submitted.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Great, thank you.
I had a question, just because I'm not, what does it mean by unified bowling? Is that,
Students with special needs, it's a new sport
Okay.
sanctioned by CASHA. We know we have some students that would be interested in that, and a coach was approved for that position last year, so we just added that. It's a shorter season toward the end of the fall, but provide a great opportunity for some students with special
and
needs.
it could be a co-ed
Yes.
team?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right,
And it's
thanks.
perfect because Special Olympics bowling is really popular. So then this gives kids a chance to kind of figure it out before they
Mm,
dive into the real stuff in Special Olympics.
Good question, thank you. The next item is 7E, policy updates from KASB.
I can't promise this will be as quick as those last three combined. So whenever we bring policies, we like to get into those just a little bit. So this set of updates came from KASB in June. There are quite a few on here that they're just telling us to adopt because they're part of new state laws or regulations that came out. The ones that are highlighted are the ones that our committee really reviewed and got into this first round. We'll bring a few more of them to you later on this fall that need a little bit more research and study, and some of them we just didn't get to in the time allotted. So we like to break these up if there's a big bunch of them. So we'll start here with the 7 that are highlighted. Policy AG is one on the closing of school buildings. And this is one where if a district may be consolidating, for instance, this is just an example, they may want to close a building or buildings. This is just the policy that promotes compliance with state law. It outlines all of the resolutions, the hearings prior, giving the reasons for the closing of the school. And then there's also the opportunity for a state board review following that. So separate from what we've been talking about, which is another one that will come down here. So that's policy AG. I'll just stop there for questions real quick if there are any. Nothing on that. Okay, the next one is GAAP, Emergency Safety Interventions. We always talk in abbreviations, ESI. You've probably heard that term. There were some pretty substantial changes made to this one. The first is defining an area of purposeful isolation, meaning it's just a separate space from a student being in a regular classroom. And we've talked a little bit about this before. We've had several trainings with our administrators. KASB was down and met with administrators a few weeks ago. There's a neat tool that's been developed that would help actually walk administrators or whomever might be involved in an ESI, determine whether it is one that's reportable. Some are and some aren't, but this tool really helps dive into saying, yes, this is a possible seclusion, please make a report. And all of our seclusions and restraints are reported. It also gets into what it means to purposefully isolate a student. It means removing them and not meaningfully engaging with them. If somebody's having a meltdown, it's tough to meaningfully engage. So we may be getting into a seclusion territory right there. But if one of the three items listed there is in question, then they have purposefully isolated a student, which does then fit into the definition of a seclusion. It does go on down to talk about the definition of seclusion there, and getting into things other than an in-school suspension or a detention, and talking about school personnel who purposefully isolate a student. Then it gets into that area of seclusion. A lot of the rest of this really defines what seclusion is a little bit more in depth. They just removed the lettering on these. None of the reporting things have changed. It's just a matter of they've removed some of the letters. And those are really the main things that will cause us to look at seclusions and ESIs a little bit more closely as we work through the year. This isn't a perfectly written ESI regulation, but it's what has been written, and it's what we have to go by. So there's going to be a lot of conversations taking place throughout this year about what may be, what is, what isn't. I know Lillian was at the KSB workshop this summer with us, and it was eye-opening. So are there any questions about this particular policy as it's written?
I have a question. A couple of weeks ago at the last board meeting, we had the presentation on student behavior, and we were told about the statute that doesn't allow us to remove a child from a classroom. But then when I hear you talk about seclusion, and if a child's having a meltdown, it sounds like then we can remove a child from a classroom, or
We can.
Okay.
As we get into ESIs, it's really a last resort. A
okay.
lot of the CPI or Crisis Prevention Institute training talks about de-escalation strategies. And in our reporting, we have to write everything that we've done up to the point where an ESI is implemented. But again, ESI is really a last resort. And it's to protect that student and the safety of the other students or adults that are in there. And it's a great question, and it does relate right to what we were speaking about a couple of weeks ago.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions about ESI? Okay, if not, we'll move on to GAOA. There was really just a technical change on this one that they suggested that we take that one phrase or sentence out to comply, and really just suggested to adopt that. So pretty standard there. GARID military leave, again, nothing major there. It was more technical to promote compliance with the law as it's written. I don't think there's, just they added some headings just to clarify some things there. So it shouldn't be anything too specific on that one. IFCC is a new one. We don't necessarily have a policy in place, but I can tell you we do have practices in place. Whenever there are overnight stays and it involves students of male and female gender, we do provide separate accommodations. But this is just a policy that outlines that for all districts to follow. It does get into the definition of biological sex and how that's defined. But then it also has some things that we were asking a lot of questions about this summer. The middle part there where it talks about school district sponsored travel. If there's a band group that travels to in the summertime to a festival or somewhere else, if the district sponsors that in a way of sending an email to advertise it, or their kids are involved in it, it's something we have to be cognizant of, as well as letting their leaders know of those clubs or organizations who may be pulling our kids as a school-sponsored type of activity or event, that we really have to be aware of those types of situations. I know most coaches or activity sponsors of those summer groups are aware and will provide those accommodations, but if it's something that we're advertising or sending emails out to people about, we really need to be communicating with them on this particular requirement. Are there any questions on this one?
So just to clarify, we are going to have this as a policy where it is defined, and it will be like on our website?
Yes, this one,
Okay.
we have to adopt it to comply with
Okay.
state law.
That's what I thought. Okay.
And I'm really sorry, Jared. I should have asked. I don't see anything about a time limit on seclusion. Like, what's the maximum amount of time? I see that you have to report the length of time, but I know that that has been an issue. Like, I think that has gone through the courts is how long students were secluded. And like, if someone got and left in seclusion all day, which I don't think that we would ever do. But is there I don't see any limit defined.
There's no defined limit. If
Okay.
we get a student who cannot re-regulate and is that unsafe, we're typically going to be calling parents to come. We aren't going to let them
Okay.
be that dysregulated all
Okay.
day. That's a traumatic experience.
Right.
For all
Horrible. I
involved.
mean, you hear about
Right.
horror stories about
Right.
solitary confinement and things like that. I mean, it's essentially the same thing.
Exactly. We've had many students that will go in and out of that regulated state. Every time, though, we get into a seclusion or a restraint, we have to document the time that's there
yeah, the
in the
length of
report
time.
that we
Okay.
submit. If the state looks at our reports and we have to give them all of the reports that we submit throughout the year, and see some discrepancies, they're going to come visit. They're
Okay.
going to say, hey, can you explain these types of situations? But
Okay.
yes, we definitely try to keep that to a minimum. And if it's dragging on, we'll definitely try to get other people on the crisis team involved to help the situation.
Thank you. I really appreciate you
Well,
clarifying.
I'm glad you circled back around because I also wanted to just help explain a little bit more. So they're also more narrowly defining timeout. So they're really defining seclusion, I guess expanding the definition of seclusion more than anything. So, and it's really because there are some school districts in the state that are not reporting. And so there are things happening and they're not reporting. And so I can tell you that we are reporting and it goes by minutes. So if a student is in seclusion 15 seconds, we round up to a minute. So anything that's over that minute mark, it goes to the next minute mark. And so we have a set of documents that would parents have that. We fill that out, explain exactly what happened. If there was a restraint. And so like Jared said, we want to make sure that we're using all of those de-escalation techniques. But if we ever would have to go to a more restrictive, or we would have to put our hands on a student to help restrain for their safety or the safety of other students, then that would be a restraint. Same thing, have the time, witnesses, et cetera. So I'm glad you asked that question because I wanted to revisit that. So I was going to wait till at the end too.
Yep.
Are there any other questions with that information or? Okay. Thanks.
Right. Anything else on the overnight accommodations?
Well, I had a question about that. So let's assume that we do have a transgender student, because the way this is written, it says separate overnight accommodations will be provided for students of each biological sex. And so let's pretend you've got someone who identifies, lives, and presents as male or female. They are not going to be with their non-biological gender, but they're also probably not going to want a room with their biological gender. They're going to look and live different. Are we going to give those students their own overnight accommodation that's theirs? I mean, how do we accommodate that? Because it doesn't really say here what you do with those students. It just says what you don't do. So how do we take care of those students who are on the bus trip?
It is a unique situation. We would obviously be in touch with our legal counsel, we'd be talking to parents, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you want to explain that one, it might help the situation.
Yeah, so we had a similar situation to what you've described, Jeremy. What we ended up doing after talking to the student and the parents was provided just another room for them. So if that is an option, that's probably based on what the student and parents want, is probably what seems best fit.
And that's what I assume we would probably end up doing, is talk to the student, talk to the
Mhm.
family, and make just, an individual accommodation for them. It's just not physically written in the policy.
Right.
And so as long as I think we're all
Also
probably on the same
flexibility.
page. Yeah.
Great questions.
Thank you for asking that question, Jeremy. So this is our policy, and then of course we have handbooks that implement our policies. So if this is our written policy, can our handbook also state something to the effect of, we will make accommodations, just so everyone's on the same page that is our practice?
Yes, we certainly can. Anytime we pass new policies like this, anyone that would or could be involved, I pass those on. So it'll be one of the first things we'll send out as soon as we can to the administrators that would have students that would be participating in trips like this.
Thank you.
And I apologize. I should have worded that better before. So this is because it's purple up there. It looks red up there, but it's purple here. So this is brand new. Like
Yes.
this, there was no, it's not replacing anything.
Correct.
This, okay. Because I know there are parents that are going to want to, okay, let me
Sure.
see it. Let me see the wording. And I'm glad that was asked so we can clarify if they do ask. So thank you.
Yeah, this was required by state statute. I
Yes.
think it's actually some of the statutes being litigated at this point still, but we're just putting in what the law says we have to now. Yeah.
It's the case with a lot of these tonight. Anything else on that one? Great questions. Okay, a couple of others here. JH is on student activities. This one reflects changes again in state law and that we have to adopt to promote compliance. This one talks about resident students who are attending non-public or private schools being eligible to participate in our activities. They have to be a resident. They have to be attending a non-public school. They still have to meet a lot of the requirements that are there in the bullet points as far as a physical. The teacher, the parent, or whomever the instructor is, someone involved in the education, has to write an affidavit saying that those students are progressing toward their grade level outcomes in order to be eligible. And they have to obviously maintain satisfactory progress. Now, what that means could be left open to interpretation. Those same students would have to be involved in any tryouts that any of the other student athletes would be involved in. If there are cuts, they would be subject to those as well. They would have to pay fees if our same students are subject to paying those fees. So this just outlines that very clearly, or as clearly as they can make it. There are some CASHA things that are involved, but the CASHA rules, I know they were debating a lot of those while this policy was coming through. And this is just the one that they had written and said, please adopt this to, again, promote compliance. So any questions on JH?
So I do have a question, and I think I probably know the answer on that. But so if these students are allowed in district activities, is there anything on here that would qualify them for being counted as a partial student for student state aid?
Not if they're not enrolled in our classes. We don't get any state aid for the athletics or those types of activities. They would have to be enrolled in a class. Now, if one of our classes or one of our sports required a student to be in a class, I'm going to say debate or weights, to participate in a weightlifting competition, they would have to be enrolled in that class, which we would get funding for then. So if that is a requirement, they would have to be enrolled in that class to participate in that particular sport or activity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but so bottom line is that we are required potentially to allow them to be involved in activities, but we're not getting any state assistance, state funding as a student
That's my understanding, yes.
for that.
So
Any
I'm
others?
not too big on this policy because I feel like if you want the benefits of the chess club, you should join the chess club. But the law is the law, and that's probably what it says we have to do. So my question for you is, we have requirements that if you're going to participate in athletics or certain activities, that you maintain certain grades, right? That you are able to meet your academic goals that we set there. So how do you measure that for someone who's not in your school? The records you get from homeschool group A versus homeschool group B, what does that actually look like when you get it? Because is it just, and I'm not saying this to knock homeschooling because I know nothing about homeschooling, but if it's just mom and dad filling out the report card, or is it an administrator filling out their report card? How do you verify the information you're getting? I'm curious.
It's a great question.
And I'm not trying to throw shade. I'm really just
I
curious.
totally understand. We had the same questions when they were presenting this to us. The last bullet there on the top page, 55, parent-teacher organization provides instruction to the student, submits an affidavit, and again, it's open to their interpretation. Hopefully, they're providing us grades or outcomes that those students are meeting. Can't require that. If it's an affidavit, we're assuming it's a document that's stating they're making progress toward the outcomes that they need to advance in the classes that they're taking, pursuing. But again, if they submit that, it's good for that sport season, and it's something we would have to accept.
And this is the lawyer in me, so I'm just curious. What does the law say, or what guidance do we have if we feel like, and I'm not saying this would happen with homeschooling, I'm just asking because I think of every worst case scenario. I was trained to do it for 3 years in law school, but let's say you've got this academic information and for some reason it seems fishy. What leeway does the law give us to say, hey, you need to give us more, or can you clarify this? Or is it sort of like you get the certification and then that's it?
As far as I know, you get what you get. It would be something we would definitely be consulting with KASB about. If there's something and we know the student is working all day and not progress, we can ask questions or ask them to provide additional information if we're just that unsure, but we have to be careful as well. But if we're ever in that situation, we would definitely be consulting with KSB, since that's where this is coming from.
Right, and if law school says these kiddos get to participate, that's great. I think we just want to make sure everyone is held to the same standards.
For sure.
Yeah, I think that Jeremy and Grant have both brought up the same issues that I was concerned about, but I feel like we're kind of stuck. I hate saying stuck, but stuck with this policy because there's a lot of gray area and concern with it. So,
It should probably also be considered that all of us pay taxes as well. You know, so if our kids are homeschooled or go to the Christian school or whatever, we still do contribute. So it's not, I mean, just to be fair, both sides.
Does FERPA cover parochial schools?
I'm
Because
sure in some senses
so
it
like if
would,
they
but-
have, because like if we want, like a student record is protected, right? So then the parent would have to consent to release that information over to
And-
us, right?
Yeah, and typically if we're dealing with an entity like that, we
Uh-huh.
have a student release of information form that we'd ask the parent
Okay.
to sign and they could, we could communicate freely about that.
Okay.
And hopefully that's a pretty easy
Yeah, I
transition.
just wondered what that, since we know so much about FERPA now.
Right. Anything else on that one? Okay, we'll move on to the last one here. KK is disposal of district property. We've been, again, talking about this one for some time. It just outlines things, again, to promote compliance with state regulation that came into effect June 8th. I can go into depth really it just talks about the timelines, what the requirements are, how the state gets involved and has right of first refusal and so on. So questions about this one?
So just a question, do we know have we seen any examples yet how the state is handling that, administrating
Yeah,
that?
not yet. It's still early,
I
but we're
understand.
watching.
For sure, yep, okay, just wondered.
Any last questions? Great, thank you.
Thank you, Jared. And to clarify these, Lillian, I should ask you first. You're on the policy committee. Is there anything else that you'd like to add from your discussions?
No, I think Jared covered everything. I will say we went to the summer legal and policy updates that KSB had. That was super informative. They did a great job covering all of these really in depth. So I don't have anything else.
Great. And I know that our practice on the previous policy updates is that we would do a first reading and a second reading, but as Lillian and Jared explained, these are things we have to do because we're bound by law to do these. And so if it's the wishes of the board, we could entertain a motion or if there's other questions.
I move that we retire current policies AG, GAAF, GAOA, GARID, JH, and KK, and adopt the corresponding updated policies and approve new policy IFCC as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Great,
Thank you all. Thanks, Casey. Thanks to the committee who reviews all of these fun items.
I did get a little chuckle because of policy GARID.
Me too. I was going to bring it up. I was like, it's a new way to spell your name. Jared.
You wrote that, didn't you?
I didn't want to disrupt the meeting just for that, but since you brought it up, Jamie, yeah.
It's been a long day for all of us. We need some humor. Okay, the next item is item 8A, Board of Education items. We have board reports. Jared, would you like to give? Jared.
She can't get you out of her mind. So Emporia Recreation Commission, the Emporia Rec Commission didn't actually meet, but our recent future funding task force met Monday or Tuesday, one of the 2 days. And they did their final discussion and recommendations to the Emporia Recreation Commission about their suggestions for whether we need to renovate a building, get a new building, how to improve the rec center. And I haven't seen their physical written recommendation yet, but I was able to read the gist of what they recommended in KVOE, I think is where I saw it, that they, and the Gazette too, that they have agreed that the current building we have has been outgrown by our community's needs, and that their suggestion at the end of the day is to build an entirely new rec center in a more central location. So the Emporia Rec Commission is going to get that on paper at some point and do our own work group, and then forward something on to the city commission. I should have also told you all this last meeting, but I forgot to. I'm now the president of the Emporia Recreation Commission. So President Dorsey, right here, has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Yeah, President Dorsey. Okay, that's all.
Thank you, President Dorsey.
You're welcome, Madam President.
Are there any other reports? Okay. We will go to our long list of executive sessions, and we have 3 that were already planned, and we've added the fourth one. And the item that we've moved from consent agenda employment recommendations will be the first executive session that we will take up. And I think, Jen, you have the motion for that.
Yes, I move to enter an executive session for 10 minutes to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel in order to protect the privacy interest of the individuals to be discussed, and to return to this room at 7:31. 7:31 p.m. Superintendent Dr. Allison Harder and I always mess it up, Stranathan, are invited to join the session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Hand vote, please. Thank you. Motion passes 7-0.
Okay.
I would move we return to regular session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes 7-0.
And now we need a motion for our employment recommendations.
I motion to approve the employment recommendations as submitted.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote. Hands. Hands.
Yeah, sorry, hands. Motion passes 7-0.
We don't know what to do when we get off agenda. So we will return to our regularly programmed agenda and we will go into the next 9A. And do I have a motion?
I move to enter an executive session for 15 minutes to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel in order to protect the privacy interests of the individuals to be discussed and to return to this room at 7:48 p.m. Dr. Allison Harder is invited to join the session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, do we have a motion to return to regular session?
So moved. I move to return to regular session.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
I move to enter an executive, oh,
Hold on just a second.
never mind.
Grant, is it coming through for you? Okay, you're a yay. Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, now, okay. I move to enter an executive session for 15 minutes to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel in order to protect the privacy interest of the individuals to be discussed and to return to this room at 8:04 p.m. Superintendent Dr. Allison Harder is invited to join the session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
It has to be updated every 2, yes. Correct. I'm sorry. Oh. All right, motion passes 5-0.